Welcome back to Lucore Automotive Services. Today I'm working on the 1972 Pontiac Ventura. We're going to do a few little things. We had this car in about a month ago for just kind of an inspection, really. We found a few things that we wanted to address. The customer okayed those things. We ordered the parts in. Now it's time to get to work. So today I'm going to basically build a set of plug wires for it so that I can loom them in such a manner that they won't burn out into the header tubes. And we're going to put in some new rear leaf springs, some new rear shocks, new rear bushings, and hopefully that will go smoothly. We'll see. As with any 50-year-old car, it's probably not going to go smoothly, but we'll see. We can be hopeful. I just finished up this 67 Camaro. There's a couple other videos on that if you're interested in old school muscle stuff. Didn't really do much with it. Fixed some fluid leaks, made the brakes work, softened up the suspension, or dialed in the suspension, so to speak. Oh, that was loud. And you know, it's good to go. But if you're interested in that 67 Camaro, we've got videos on it on our page. Right now we're gonna get to work on this Ventura. It's really just a Nova with a Pontiac badge and a different front end. But hey, badge engineering at its best. Actually a pretty cool car. This one does have a Chevrolet 350 in it and a turbo 350 transmission, as I recall. So, let's get to work. Power. This is why people don't like doing old rusty cars. Gross. Hey, I win. That bolt looks like heck. Fighting rust is never fun. So I'm whittling away at this Pontiac Ventura. I went ahead and started on the rear leaf spring that had not been changed previously because I figured they didn't replace it because they ran into a headache. And I was correct. The trapped nuts that hold the front spring pocket in place were all stripped. So I just cut the heads of the bolts off, changed the J-nuts out, put it all back together. That one's all back together now. This one should be a little bit easier since it was already done by somebody previously. But we wanted to change both leaf springs as a pair, that way our ride height is even. So now we'll take this one apart. Funny thing about the rear bushings when you put them into these leaves don't fit. I was a little surprised at how loose they were, but when you tighten them down, they puff out and fill up the space. So it's a Definitely a different design than what I'm used to working on, and I honestly haven't put leaf spring bushings in one of these in at least 15 years, probably when I did my uncle's 67 Camaro frame off. But it is what it is. Pretty straightforward, changing the leaf springs out on these. You got 4 bolts on your axle pad, you've got 2 nuts on your shackle, 3 bolts on your front spring perch, and the whole spring's out of the way. So I'll get this other one done and we'll keep moving forward. Whoa, easy. Gravity still works. This is pretty boring stuff. I appreciate you guys watching this stuff. Get these air lines out of here. Air shocks. Gross. Let's let the leaves control the ride height as it should be. Alright, on that note, put some back tires back on this thing and let's build some spark plug wires so that they can be loomed properly and not melt against the header tubes. So this Pontiac Ventura came into us originally for engine drivability problems, and it had just had plug wires put on it by another shop. And I'm like, well, it needs plug wires. They're like, well, we need to go to the show. Can you make it work? So I zip tied the wires up so that they would be away from the header tubes. And so the last 2 months, this thing was driving around with that as they're firing their the number 6 cylinder. So we're gonna fix that. Got one more wire to do, and we'll be back together. There's a couple others that we're contacting. They weren't that bad, but that's no bueno. That one's cooked too. I think there were 3 that I found that were arcing out. Wire routing, it's important. Well, it's been a long time since I've worked on one of these old Nova bodied cars. And this one we're trying to sort out some ride quality issues. It had a very stiff rear suspension. It was on air shocks providing lift, so you have an air shock that's pumped up and basically you're riding around on 2 pogo sticks in the back of the car. So I put in new leaf springs, and then I used the McBay Performance rear shackles to get the altitude in the rear end that I'm looking for. And that created a problem with our shocks because the shocks are only like 21 inches long. The air shocks are 22 inches long. So I ended up getting these competition engineering shocks, which we're going to dial down on the soft setting, which is 50-50 dampening for ride quality. And it's got 2 other settings, each progressively firmer. But even these are pretty short. Now this is in the air, there would be some droop, but even with the droop at the ride height we're looking for, this is at the top of its travel. So to resolve that, we went again to McBay Performance, and they sent me some post-it notes and a bill. And we're going to put these 3-inch shock extensions in, and that will allow our shock travel to be in the center of the shock tube when it's sitting at ride height. That way when we're riding, we're actually getting travel out of our shocks. We're not bottoming on one end or the other, and we're not riding around on a jacked up, aired out pogo stick. So we're going to install these shock extensions and some new shocks, and we'll see how it sits. I think the ride height will be right where they want it. I've already got my new plug wires built, so that's pretty much about it on this one. We'll get these things in here and figure out what's next. So I went to put in my spacer, and this one's machined just a hair off, and it wouldn't fit over there. I'm going to try it on the other side and see if it works over there. If it doesn't fit exactly, then I'll just use a carbide and elongate the hole a little bit. Not a big deal, but it's a nice part. Just didn't fit. At any rate, sometimes that happens. So the shocks we're using are not for this car, and they have a bolt that goes in the lower eye bushing. So I'm actually pressing the old spacers out of the lower eye, and I'm going to use those in the other shock so that we don't have any play in our bolt. Not very exciting stuff, but it's the stuff that has to happen. And that guy will go in there with a bolt. Right at the middle of our tube, at least closer than we would have been, because we would have been at the bottom of the tube before, or the top of the tube. 22 inches is our ride height to the eye. I gotta work this fine. 8 inches. We got 8 inches on our shaft. We're shooting to be right around that 4-inch mark, be right in the middle of our shock travel. Should be pretty close. Let's get the other side done. Hit it. Nice. Well, that wraps up our session with this Pontiac Ventura for now. Took a lot longer than it should have, but I wanted it to ride a certain way, and that took some time to order the right parts and to find the right parts and to get the parts here. All in all, this thing rides wonderfully now. It used to ride like you had a log wagon suspension in the back. Being on the pumped up air shocks really doesn't do much for ride quality, but it does give plenty of clearance for tires. So we now have natural spring action, which is where our ride height is set. We've got our shocks with basically within an inch of center inside the tubes of the shocks. So we've got good travel for our dampening. Our dampening set 50-50 on the rear shocks, so it's got a nice smooth street action. Built a set of plug wires for this thing. This car actually has AC, and it has AC headers on it. So the number 6 header tube is super close to the spark plug boot. So it will probably burn that plug boot up, and then we'll try and find one of the shorty spark plugs. And if that doesn't solve our problem, we will probably put a different set of headers on this thing. But who knows, we'll see. We're gonna let the customer have it back, take it out, enjoy it for the weekend, and then they will let us know what they want to do next. It's actually a pretty cool little car. So this is the Pontiac Ventura. So there was the Nova, the Omega, the Ventura, and the Apollo. And those were all the same chassis, just a different nose and you know, badge engineering at its best. So, thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe. Have a great day. We'll see you around.